ho! Oh, shots fired.
How did you start and get involved in wrestling?
It was actually by accident. T Phoenix made a few words. He goes, "You want to come back?" Yeah, sure, if you'll have me. He's put on a little bit of muscle. He's shaped up. He's also someone who's pushing himself past his limits.
Right before the pandemic for a few months, we've seen vignettes, we've seen one match only, but you started getting paired with Alessandro Russo.
I always tried looking out for the guy. We clicked in a lot of ways outside the arena. There was some gold on the line. We were going after it. Puts me over the freaking top. He got selfish. When Dibiase came walking out to the ring, I couldn't say no. Matt taught me how to keep it real. When I first met him, I thought, oh, who's this guy in the suit with his nose in the air? Let me try to save him from making some of the same mistakes that I did. And in turn, he made every single one. So bravo. No, actually, he's made a few that I didn't, but I'm not going to go there.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. Another episode of Best for Business. I'm absolutely pumped for this one. Somebody I've known legit since my first ever wrestling show, and now I can say I can commentate with you all the time. Bobby Rossi, thank you for joining me for this one.
Thank you for giving me the rub, and thank you for giving me a slot on this platform, my friend.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Fun fact, you did the first ever intro when it was called the Character to Canvas podcast, so I appreciate it.
Ah, full circle moment right here. Awesome, awesome.
So I've commentated a lot of shows with you, but I don't think I asked you, how did you start and get involved in wrestling?
It was actually by accident.
Really?
Yeah, there was a friend of mine who was the announcer for the RWA. And for a lot of years, I didn't watch wrestling. I didn't watch the product. I wasn't watching it on TV. I wasn't savvy to what was going on in the indies, anything of the sort. But I had so many friends still involved, or at least watching the shows, that I would get invites to pay-per-views or what have you. So kind of like how you talk shop about baseball during the off season, I was always talking wrestling in some form of business. Well, this friend of ours was, like I had said, he was the announcer for the RWA at the time, and he had an ulterior motive. He wanted out. He wanted to try to work his way into the book. But he suggested to me one day, he goes, you know, you should announce for the RWA. And I said, yeah, okay. Who the hell's the RWA? Having no idea what indie wrestling was, okay? This was a conversation that took place sometime late 2010, early 2011. And sure enough, by the spring of 2011, I came to one of the tapings that the RWA was having at The Force. That was the name of the building that we operated out of at the time. There's this little hole in the wall in Centerdale, North Providence. It is now currently Tillinghast's boxing gym.
That used to be for where RWA ran?
That used to be The Force. That was, RWA used to run in that place.
Wow.
And that's when and where and how I got started.
So you said your friend said that you should be the announcer. Before wrestling, did you have like prior experience announcing?
No, but I did have prior experience in the local music scene.
Nice.
Actually, I played bass guitar for the better part of 5 years with a couple of different bands. And I don't know, man, like the voices of wrestling, those people, the talking heads, if you will, the Mean Gene and Jim Ross and the Brain Monsoon, Jim Ross, all those guys, I gravitated towards them. Even as a child, like someone like your age, when you broke into our scene and stuff, I always had like an affinity for those types of characters. So I guess maybe that's why my buddy was like, "Yo, you should try announcing." I don't know.
So what was your first interaction with RWA? Let's talk about your buddy T Phoenix. So how did this start?
My buddy T Phoenix. He had no idea who I was. I had no idea who he was. I show up at this, like I said, the old Tillinghast gym, and I didn't know what to expect, but it was a taping of sort, and everybody's kind of like running around doing their own thing. And I'm watching these people with a shoestring budget put together what they could for an independent production. And for me, it was really cool because I hadn't done anything like that the better part of maybe 6 or 7 years. Like I stopped with my little, soiree with local music by like 2005. I was done by that point. So I show up and up stands over me this mountain of a man, T Phoenix, is what's your ring name? And I'm looking at this guy and I'm like halfway shitting my pants. I can barely think of anything. First name that comes to mind, my cousin Bobby's name. Is that Bobby Rossi? Fair enough, it works for me. Do you have the info you need? No. Talk to them. Okay, thanks. And that was how that was how I got started with RWA. By the time the tapings were over, because at this time they used to do a bi-weekly segment all in one shot. So they would film 2 separate episodes in one filming, and they would send that off to the Rhode Island Public Access Channel, Channel 18, as it was called. So after we were done, I'm hanging with everybody, I'm talking, I'm BSing, cracking open sodas and stuff like that. And afterwards, T Phoenix, man, a few words, he goes, "Did you enjoy yourself?" Yeah, I did. You want to come back? Yeah, sure, if you'll have me. And wow. I haven't left since. That's how I ended up being a thorn in that fat bastard side.
So when we talk about RWA, when you first started to where it is now, what do you think has been the transformation of RWA?
The big well, there's been a few. There's been a few, to be fair. But rather than rattle off all the different eras that I've witnessed, I would say the biggest transformation would be the fact that RWA operated as a club for its first few years, and maybe for a little bit longer after that. Now I would say RWA truly does operate like a local indie. And the thing of it is, RWA was never indie. And we're always kind of considered a little bit of a black sheep because we did things our own way. And a lot of our guys, a lot of our roster, if you will, was under or completely untrained. That's how it started. We're not taking those kinds of risks anymore. There's a lot more concern to safety. There's a lot more of a pressure for professionalism. There's a bigger press for production than ever before. I can remember RWA shows being filmed with a handheld like camcorder that you buy from Walmart, plugged into the wall, bro.
Wow.
What hard cam? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like to see it go from almost like a high school project to something that's helped a lot of people take the next steps in whatever their wrestling journey is. That's the biggest transformation that I can see. I can see that it's actually become somewhat credible from something that was really a stain on the area for a little while. And it was definitely viewed as such, 100%.
So when we talk about RWA, I know me and you talk about a lot of the talents, but one of the people I wanted to ask you about, you've got to see the transformation of where he is now, Steven Lust.
Sure.
Tell me about what you've seen. Tell me about what you've seen in Steven Lust.
Oh, man, what I've seen in Steven Lust is an unwillingness to be comfortable. This guy, even before he knew what he was doing, was pushing himself to do more. I've also seen someone that's not so full of himself to the point to where he can't take in criticism. He doesn't take it personally, and he does apply it to his craft. I saw someone that was one half of a tag team, and for a good stretch, the guy was seen as one half of a tag team. And that wasn't fair. It was always compared to, when they were the Middlesex Express, the Middlesex Express split. What hindered him at one point then became his greatest asset. Having to do all the work, having to really plan out several modes of attack as a singles competitor, as opposed to having someone to collaborate with in that very moment. That, I think, has been the biggest game changer for Lust, what I see in him is someone that he won't take himself so seriously that he becomes the joke,
Mhm.
but he does take what he does very seriously. He does take entertainment and being hokey and being expressive seriously. The guy does do it as a job, and I think for someone that wanted to jump in just to see how far he could take it, he's really turned himself into I would say a semi-professional. And the only reason why I say semi is because he's professional grade. I just don't think that the work has been done to really promote himself like outside of the area,
Mhm.
or even as like more of a competitive commodity.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
I see that Steven Lust is over with a lot of other competitors, and other people from within the scene see him differently. But I also see the ability of someone to be marketed outside the scene
Yeah.
and pull people into it. That's what I see in Stephen Lust. I see a buttload of character that has almost kind of been put on the back burner because he's so focused on his technicianship, his timing, his execution, which has improved tenfold in
Yeah.
the matter of the past 2 years. You know,
Yeah. And then to go with that, we've commented on a lot of live pro wrestling shows where two guys, whether it's somebody cancels out or something, two guys have stepped up. One has been Steven Lust a lot, and the other one has been AJP. Now, when you went to RWA in 2011, you've got to see AJP at a young age. How has his transformation been like to you've seen? Because right now, I think he might be in the best shape of his life. He's even said that.
that's the first thing that comes to mind. That's the first thing that comes to the eyes. You know, I think this is the first time I've actually ever seen him wrestle.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is, yeah, he's been around for a lot of years. But you're talking about someone who literally, like you, grew up in the scene
Mhm.
and he learned a lot by trial and error.
Yeah.
Now he's shaking all the baby fat. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? He's in his early 20s. He's put on a little bit of muscle. He's shaped up, and he's also someone who's pushing himself past his limits
Mhm.
almost every time he's out there. I commend him for putting himself under the pressure that he does. I just wish he knew when to take his foot off the gas.
Yeah.
And this is something I've said to him personally. It's not
He's
like
even
I'm,
said on my podcast when he was
it's
on.
it's
Yeah.
it's finding that balance. And
Yeah.
well, nobody masters this overnight. But when you ask me what's the biggest transformation, I've seen him now approach this from more of an adult mindset
Mhm.
than I have in the past. Whereas he's always been this kid with a knack. That's changed now.
Mhm. So another thing I was pumped to ask you, I feel like it was short lived. Right before the pandemic for a few months, we've seen vignettes, we've seen one match only, but you started getting paired with Alessandro Russo. Now, walk me through. Was that your idea? Was that his idea? How did that come to be? And even at the end, one of the last shows ever at the Chop Shop might have been the last one you got to wrestle him.
Yeah, yeah, we so I always tried looking out for the guy,
Hmm.
but that damn Russo, he always wanted more than he could chew.
Yeah,
But if we're gonna pull the curtain back a bit, um, Russo and I are a pair of meatballs that just click instantly.
nice. Yeah,
Really is what it
yeah.
boils down to, and just having a sense of familiarity kind of lumped us together
Hmm.
without even it just wasn't by design. It did just kind of happen.
Yeah.
At the first time I ever met him actually was at a House of Bricks event.
Hmm.
And I think just from then on, we've been somewhat tied at the hip. And I would say it's mostly because we clicked in a lot of ways outside the arena amidst, real life in so many ways. We
But you
could
don't catch that
identify
often, so that's awesome.
it is. So I felt like, okay, well, this guy's coming into it a bit older, like I did.
Hmm.
He's coming into it a bit blind, like I did. Let me try to save him from making some of the same mistakes that I did.
Hmm.
And in turn, he made every single one. So bravo, Russo, attaboy. But no, actually, he's made a few that I didn't. But I'm not going to go there. Hey-ho! Oh, shots fired. Russo and I ended up working together because really, when you talk about organic chemistry, I think that's one of the things that it's based off of. If you can get along with somebody without trying, there's something there. And on the flip side, if you have someone or a pair of people that just for no reason can't get along, if they could be professional, you're talking about an amazing program.
Mhm.
When you talk about organic chemistry, that goes both ways. And I wanna put an example on that. As a child, I would see Ric Flair and I couldn't stomach him. I booed and hissed and I swear I'd get in trouble from my mother and grandmother for swearing at the TV. And then come full circle a few years later, NWO's taking over that WCW. They're all over the place. They get all the TV time. And all of a sudden, Arn and Flair and Roddy are all kind of banding together. And for the first time in my fandom of wrestling, I felt for Rick.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
there's a genuine connection there, but it didn't start off so sweet.
Mhm.
I couldn't stand the guy at first. How dare he think of himself so highly? This old guy with gray hair, and at the time he was probably like 40,
Yeah.
right? But now, when you talk about having an organic chemistry, when you talk about having something that you could just go with and not have a script behind you, you
Mhm.
kind of run with that. And I feel as though that's why Russo and I ended up paired the way we did when we did, because there was that chemistry. There was that immediate trust factor off rip.
So walk me through, when was the time? Because we don't see Bobby Rossi wrestle that much. So walk me through that match.
All right, so here's what happened. We had ourselves a plan, okay?
Mhm.
Russo and I. There was a rumble that happened about a few weeks beforehand at the chop
The
shop.
Brick House Cup, like #1 contender or something, I remember.
Yes. There was some gold on the line, and we were
Yeah.
going after it, you know. So I get in there. I figure I'm gonna be not the muscle, but I'm gonna be the size that he isn't.
Mhm.
I get ahead of myself. You know, I turn my back to him. I was talking smack. He puts me over the freaking top. He got selfish.
What a guy.
What a guy, right? I
Yeah.
show him the ropes. He tips my ass over them. What a piece of work. So that was it. I had to try to get even, Mr. Sanders. That's what happened. And
So,
unfortunately, I
so
didn't
what's
quite get
like
even.
the Bobby Rossi moveset like? Like, what's the finish? Like, what are some signature moves?
Try not to have a stroke before the bell rings. That's
Okay.
that's the whole motive attack. Jokes aside, I was doing that kind of stuff when I was much lighter.
Mhm.
I mean, before the pandemic, dude, I really was. I was about 75, if not more pounds lighter.
Yeah.
And I liked training with the wrestlers when I could off camera because I felt as though it gave me a little bit of instinct
Mhm.
that I could use from either the role of a referee or from the role of a commentator or from the role of an any sort of way, you know. There's some things that you can teach, but until you really go through the pains of it, you're not really able to empathize in a way where you can paint the picture differently.
Right.
You've been there on the call with me where things are coming awry a bit,
Mhm.
and it's on us to go ahead and put a different spin on things and to maybe put the attention somewhere else.
Mhm.
I feel as though when I was training in ring, I feel as though my instincts for that were much sharper. Now that I do this a bit more as a hobby, now that I do this a lot less frequent as I used to, and now that I'm not as, say, intimate with the craft as I once was, as someone who would train, as someone who would bump and go through, move sets, that I feel as though it's kind of hurt my work, my character work. That's where me and Russo wrestling each other really came from. You
Yeah.
know, it was always if I had the opportunity to get some ring time off camera, I did,
Mhm.
and I miss it. I'm not gonna lie, I do miss it. But at this size and at this age, I would have to make some major lifestyle changes before I do that again.
Yeah. So I was introduced to you to XWA. Now I want to talk to you about XWA, but I also want your perspective for somebody that was part of like behind the scenes and commentated. How different and how much like of an impact was it having a show like XWA Thursday Night Throwdowns or RWA Hype TV, where it was like weekly shows to build to the bigger shows rather than shows like Live Pro and all the shows we do now, where it's just like one show a month?
Right. Episodically, when you run some sort of show like that episodically, you have to have a long-term mindset, and you also have to be able to put different places in where you got to be able to make audibles on the fly. People call out, people get hurt, what have you. But you also have to fill in a lot more blanks. You have to do a little bit more micromanaging, I would say, on a personnel basis,
Yeah.
which makes things extremely laborsome, and it can burn out your crew. And I saw that. I saw that at Thursday Night Throwdown. But what I also saw, and everyone was a part of it, I saw the area become a buzz with wrestling in a way that it really hadn't been before. Not to take anything away from other indies. They have their place. They've been holding it down in their own way. But Thursday nights were so hot for a minute. It was a place where you could network. It was a place where you could maybe mill your craft a little bit better, learn a thing or two, because you had a chance to compete with those that were on their way to TV. You know what I mean? And Thursday nights made such an impact that it created a standard that is now employed by other promotions that are closer to TV world, promotions that do have a bigger standing in the indies nowadays. So the Thursday nights was influential, instrumental in a lot of ways. Overall, as far as like the scene is concerned. Speaking personally, if you were to count the matches I did in a matter of 1 year, it's somewhere over 10,000. It's something silly. It really is. When you think about it, you're averaging no less than 8 to 10 matches per week. You know what I mean? Then you throw in the Saturday night events that they used to have, and all the other promotions that I was working with at the time, because my weekends were constantly full. It gave me so many reps that at one point I really felt as though I could almost do it in my sleep.
Wow.
It gave me a set of confidence, and it gave me a mindset that I did not have for commentary until after having done a year straight of Thursday nights. So it was big for me, and I think there were a lot of athletes. I think there were a lot of wrestlers and performers that gained the same benefit of wrestling every single week, knowing that your camera angles weren't going to change much. You would have a crowd that, if they wanted to, they'd hijack the show on you. And you, as a performer, now have to call the audible.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it was a really good place to learn trial by fire. I would say.
We've seen you as a commentator for XWA, but tell me about the occasion you were the acting commissioner for the XWA.
I was always interested in management in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So when the opportunity made itself available, I jumped on it. And there was this guy, Christian Frost. Christian Frost, he wrestled for the XWA for a little while. People don't like to talk about this, but that son of a bitch kidnapped me. He beat me up, and he violated me in ways that are illegal in most states, okay?
Yeah.
So going into Resolution 13, it was so much on the line. I said, I can't have another potential lawsuit. I'm going to nix the cage match. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to nix the cage match. I'm going to minimize the risk as much as possible. I had a lot of people there at the time, for crying out loud. Ric Flair was there. We're actually we did a tribute for Reed, his son, at that very event. So seeing as how I had a rough ride, if you will, as commissioner for the XWA, Resolution 13, I was going to put my foot down. But when DiBiase came walking out to the ring with the $17 that T Phoenix insists I was paid off with, I couldn't say no, Chris.
Yeah.
I
I
took
don't
the money and ran, and they didn't like that. That's when I got demoted from acting commissioner to commentator at the XWA.
So when we talk about XWA, we talk about first, one of my like craziest moments was RWA Spectacle last year when I got to be on the call with you and Bob Whitney, because every Thursday you guys would be the host of XWA. You would make your entrance around the ramp. I loved it. So what was your first interaction with Bob Whitney? What's it like working with him over all these years?
I've watched Bob grow in ways that I don't think he saw possible when he first started. And it was a lot of it was thanks to Thursday nights. Bob was brought in to be the announcer. I was, they were giving me another shot with the company as a commentator. They were like, don't steal from us this time. Yeah, okay, fine. So, so I'm doing the call by myself, and it sucks. It's tough. You can do it, but it's a difficult task. So Bob was learning. He was learning at his own pace, but he was doing a really good job as an announcer. And management would hit him up with like last minute changes to announcements in the middle of a match. So multitasking between that and commentating was difficult for him, and he wasn't comfortable with it. So I would try to lead him in a few times softly, like, "Hey Bob, what do you think so and so has to do to possibly get in this match? Get the upper hand back in this matchup?" And he'd kind of stammer a little bit, and then he'd back off. Well, finally, I had had enough. You know what I mean? I wasn't waving him in anymore. I just slapped him on the back. Bob, it has been 3 minutes, and I literally had to like scare him into the job. But giving him that shot in the arm was great because in a short amount of time he found his character.
Mm-hmm.
He found his way to put his special spin and his personal touch on what it is us stick men, us auxiliary characters tend to do. And working with him as someone who needed help, needed to be shown a few things, to working with him as a partner, a straight up collaborator, that's been really cool. And I can honestly say it's been nice to pay forward what others have done for me.
Yeah.
And Bob is just he's got a unique energy about himself.
Mm-hmm.
He really does. He's got a great style. He's not overly formal. Like he's not the tuxedo that Rich Palladino is.
Mm-hmm.
But he does do just a fine job on his own with his own style, his own look, his own dress, his own character. And it's awesome. It's awesome to see.
I wasn't going to mention it, but since you said the word tuxedo, tell me about that tuxedo match you had with Bob Whitney.
Oh God! See, here's the thing. That he started to bite off a bit more than he could chew too. He wanted my spot at the RWA. Okay, you don't get to be T Phoenix's cuddle buddy by just winning a match or two, pal.
Yeah.
It don't work like that. But he thought he was gonna nix me. He thought he was gonna win my place at the Renegade Wrestling Alliance. I didn't want to do it. I don't want to wrestle a tuxedo match. I don't want to get in my mudandis in front of everyone.
Yeah.
But I agreed to it because I wasn't going to let this go without a fight. I had to put him in his place in front of his wife.
So one other thing you talked about, they would have Thursdays, the next day we would have the Saturday show, or the Saturday pay-per-views, as we were calling them, or premium live events, what are they called now? So at those, we would see Rich Palladino come sometimes on Thursdays, and then after all these years, we're still working with him at live pro wrestling and other events. So tell me about Rich Palladino working with him.
I think Rich Palladino is a true testament to professional wrestling, to sports entertainment, really. And I know it sounds like I'm throwing a lot of buzzwords out here, but I remember when the Fink went from being a very stoic character, a very characterless character. He was the ring announcer. The ring announcer really wasn't a character. And as he got to the twilight of his career, he decided to have some fun.
Yeah.
And the Fink did all sorts of wild things on camera. At the same time, in the indies and in other promotions, the ring announcer started to have their own gimmicks. You'd have a heel ring announcer, or you'd have a manager acting as a ring announcer, stuff like that. Rich never did any of that. He always kept it true. He always kept it classic.
Mm-hmm.
Even at a time when the industry got really gritty,
Yeah.
90s, post 90s. I know you've heard a lot of those stories.
Yeah.
You know, Rich has always had a genuine willingness to help. He's taught me a lot without pulling me by the scruff of the neck saying, "Come here, kid, let me learn you something." Just by being a good person, just by being an optimal professional at all times, I've learned so much from him.
Yeah.
And off camera, it's not like he's a different person, but he does have a very majestic aura about himself. And then once you get off camera, he's one of the boys.
Yeah.
He's not full of his own shit. And that's one of the things I love about Rich the absolute most.
Yeah. So when we talked about XWA, like you mentioned, we didn't really know sometimes on Thursdays and other events who they would bring down. So a lot of the wrestlers, they got tested, but they learned a lot. But also on commentary, we've gotten see a few people. So one of the guys I want to ask you about, tell me about some of the things you learned from Matt Stryker.
Matt taught me, huh? Matt taught me how to keep it real in the moment. And what I mean, not by keep it real, like, oh, let people know where you come from. No. There's an ebb and flow to everything, right? So you know how, like, you and I, when we're getting ready to, make the call, we'll introduce who's competing, and then we introduce as to why.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that formulaic stuff I learned from Matt, but I also learned from him how to make the most out of a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And you really have to forget almost everything you've learned, and you have to put yourself in that moment and explain it in a way that also brings the people in.
Yeah.
Now, let me give you, for instance, I had a chance to work with him over the course of a year. It's not like we got together every Thursday night. That'd be crazy. But every large scale pay-per-view that we had, Matt would be in town. Okay. Matt from day one treated me like the boss. In other words, he could have easily shown up, be like, "All right, kid, this is what we're doing." He didn't do that. He was like, "What's going on with these matches?" He would ask me. So I asked him, and I told him this, that, and the other thing. And then he asked me again. He goes, "How do you want to run this?" I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, this is your place. Do you want to do like more of a colored thing?" He gave me the grace of asking me how things should go. And at first I was a little not off put, but I was taken aback, if you will, right? Because I was expecting this guy to come in and tell me how it was done. That wasn't how he worked with me the first meeting. Afterwards, he kind of gave me some pointers. You know what I mean? He was like, "Well, you could use some work here, you could use some work there in specific areas." And I don't want to give away too much, but I will say this. By the time Matt left, which was a year later, maybe about eight events in total, I think he ended up doing with us. From resolution to resolution, I went from being someone that had to learn as much as I could from him. I went from being someone that tried to make an impression upon him to when he would show up, I was someone that he could depend on. Like, "Rossi, what's the story with these guys? Is this canon? Is this not?" And I'd be able to chop it up really quick with him, give him the info he needed. And then before you know it, Matt would be around the locker room giving pointers to everybody in competition.
Wow.
So it was almost like he started off as a teacher, very much so. And we ended up working together as collaborators towards the end.
Wow.
That was really cool.
Yeah.
That was really cool. I'm grateful for everything that he showed me, because I feel as though everything he showed me allowed me to at times stay fresh. That's the biggest challenge in what you and I do, right?
Oh yeah.
Putting a different spin on what it is that these folks are doing in the ring, and working with him gave me, I would say, the most amount of flexibility because from him I could glean in different areas. He was the one that introduced the idea of pulling from different forms of entertainment. If there's a certain character that has a likeness to, let's say, a John Wick, for instance, you would want to make that comparison. You would want to create that imagery.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah. So we talk about your commentary partners. I don't know. I think last year was some of the most fun I had in commentary. You, me, and Alexander Worthington. So tell me about him.
Alexander Worthington. He's a snide bastard, I'll tell
Oh
you. But
yeah.
I've grown to like him over the years. I've grown to like him. I think that snooty persona of his, I think it's a bit of a put on. But we're not gonna wax poetic. Alexander Worthington is someone that I've grown respect for because when I first met him, I thought, oh, who's this guy in the suit with his nose in the air? But come to find out, he's competed. He's quite a bit, and he does have a genuine love for what it is we all do. It's nice to work in a trio because I really haven't worked much of a trio since my time at XWA. It was me and Whitney for the longest time, and then when it would come to a large scale event, it would then become a trio of some sort. You
Mhm.
know, but I can remember working trios with him and John Roy, and that was always a blast. Working with you and Worthington, it's fun because I like being in in the passenger seat. I like seeing you take the wheel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's really what I enjoy the most about live pro wrestling, working there at least. And I just wish Worthington would stop trying to put his spin on the truth.
Yeah. So
That's really what I wish.
So another company I wanted to ask you about, I know you probably had the most fun there. Live Prov Wrestling and then Providence WrestleParty. So tell me about that, like some of the craziest ideas. Because for a while, I think you were doing commentary by yourself and then you were joined by people.
Yeah, they did have me doing it solo because this was a very grassroots shoestring budget type of thing that Sully Banger had going on.
Yeah.
John Roy's favorite part of live Prov wrestling is that I called it live Pro wrestling. I called it live Prov wrestling because I
I've
told him.
done that so many times and I still do it on these
Yeah,
podcasts.
dude. He pointed that out. He's like, that's my favorite part of the broadcast. Thanks, John. There's a similar energy.
Yeah.
I mean, with Teddy's shows, it's not as over the top theatrical as they were with the Providence Wrestle Party, but there's very much let's cut loose, let's have fun, but let's all be kind to one another. Let's all be
Mhm.
good to each other. And I think that's something that Sully Banger should be given a ton of credit for. When I showed up in 2011, the climate was still kind of rusty from what spilled over in the 90s and the post 90s. And you
Mhm.
could you could still get away with saying some things that you really shouldn't have been able to.
Yeah.
With the rules that Sully laid down for his promotion, I've seen a lot of other promotions maybe not put out the same product, but they have the same codes of conduct.
Mhm.
And that's a great thing. Wrestling did really need to clean itself up. And I believe the WrestleParty had a big part in that. The other half of it is the fucking zaniness of this product.
Well, now, was this all
I
Sully Banger though? Like his visions?
It was the foundation of it was like it was
Okay.
basically his idea was pro wrestling meets punk rock.
Mhm.
And him being like a Providence scene kid, he had the golden opportunity to do it because he had somewhat of an audience already kind of built in. But he wasn't going out there trying to reel in wrestling fans like a lot of us are.
Mhm.
He made wrestling fans. He
Yeah.
turned people that would rather go to a show, like a live music event or a theatrical event. He turned people like that on to pro wrestling, but it was his style. And anyone who had any kind of idea worth listening to got a chance to voice their opinion, got a chance to voice their ideas. It wasn't like it was all Sully. But him having the platform of this punk rock meets pro wrestling, let's get weird, that brought a lot of creativity out of people. You know what I mean? So just watching a lot of these ideas and a lot of these scenarios germinate, that in itself was fun. But going out there, not being scripted, just having a couple of things you couldn't say and being given the freedom to do so, that was awesome. That was absolutely awesome. My favorite, absolute favorite matchup from WrestleParty is the Choose Your Adventure match.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God. Like, it's so stupid, but it was fantastic,
Yeah.
genius, and you couldn't pull that off in many other venues. You know, the lighting kind of dropping and then changing different colors and hues. That made all the difference. That set the scene. That's where it's different between your typical indie show. Your typical indie show is underneath the gymnasium lights. Let's go, bro. It's different. Whereas with Sully and the Black Box and WrestleParty, it was almost kind of like going into wrestling's twilight zone. It was wild. It was weird. I miss it dearly.
Yeah, that match was great too. And then the other one that me and my dad still talk to, the Don't Wake Daddy match. It was Buddy Costa and Bo Douglas, and Tony P is the ref. Amazing.
Like, where have you ever seen such a thing?
Yeah.
It's so stupid, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
And they did their part. A really good match. I don't know if this was a singles match or if it was part of a scramble. I think it was part of a gauntlet. Richard Holiday and Insane Dick Lane, they had themselves an encounter at WrestleParty. If you could dig that up anywhere, some way, somehow, dig that up. That was cool.
Yeah,
that was really cool.
Like, some of the things you like, I don't even know like how to explain. Like, I remember for 1 year for the Middlesex Express birthday, they had them versus the Ugly Ducklings, and then the lights go out, and 3 ninjas attacked Coach Mikey, but 2 of the ninjas were Becca and Little Mean Kathleen.
Oh my God. Oh, the wild times. We did this one-off in the middle of Hyannis, I think we went to. We went pretty far out to the Cape. There was a convention taking place, art student convention going on. Wednesday night, February, snowing. We're changing in a kitchen because this is all being taken place in a banquet room, right? Banquet hall. So the ring's getting put together on the quick. We're all changing up, and no one's really saying anything, but we're all thinking the same thing. What the frig did we get ourselves into? Why are we doing this? Well, a little bit of time goes by. I go outside because I'm working as a referee that night. I go outside, just kind of killing time, and the place goes from empty to packed.
Yeah.
Wait, it gets better. These students have been walked through all sorts of different workshops, interactivity, and improv, and all these things that are really adaptable to pro wrestling. We went from this empty banquet room to where we're like, why are we here? To a screaming mob of 200 plus art students that were the most engaging fans I think I've ever worked in front of.
Yeah.
I mean, going ape shit from body slams and hip tosses and drop kicks, bro. It was so much fun because they were so into it.
I don't know if you refed it. I remember watching. It was actually a really good match. It was Montero and Divine versus Sean and Tom, and the crowd was electric for that one.
They were. I don't know if I refed that one or not. I can't remember, but yeah, they were wild. They were absolutely wild. Oh man, Sully had it wasn't so much that he had vision. Don't get me wrong, but I think when you're involved in wrestling for so long, you get rigid because there's so many things that you got in your mind, like can't have this and can't do this and can't do that. Whereas Sully just kind of had this see what happens, kind of attitude. He had a lot of trust and he had a lot of faith with those that he would put on camera. And in the same token, like if you did a couple things on camera that really just weren't kosher, man, you were gone. So having that sense of I've got the right people with me, I think gave him the flexibility to let things go at times.
Yeah.
You know, when he dressed up the DCMC as a bunch of pirates
Oh my,
just because. Why?
them
Why was that so
against
over?
Liftington teaming up with the main event. That might have been one of my actually matches. That was an insane match.
That was really good, dude.
Yeah.
It was super indie, but they would have that style of match.
Yeah.
And it was good because with WrestleParty, you always had the super indie match, the comedy match, the what the fuck match,
Yeah.
the straight up pro wrestling, the old man 70s style wrestling match. There was a lot of variety within the show itself. And I think there's a lot that other promotions could take from that and adapt to their own. I'm not saying have the don't wake daddy match, but have that kind of dexterity, have some variety within what you're doing.
Yeah.
Don't be so quick to try to emulate what the captains of industry are doing.
So I go along with wrestling. You've been announcing boxing lately, and you've been doing some nice arenas and stuff like that. So tell me about how'd you first get involved with boxing, and tell me about some of your experiences, because I see your Instagram posts and everything. You're killing it there too.
Thank you, bunch for the flattery, and it feels new. Like wrestling, I've been doing it a while, and it gets stale from time to time. Even if you got like a bunch of folks there you never met before, you're in a big arena, like it's fun for the moment.
Yeah.
But with boxing, there's a much different feel. This is a lot more of a sporting event feel as opposed to a show. All right. So the atmosphere is a bit different, especially in the locker room, especially the backstage. It really isn't like backstage. It's a locker room. How I got started. Well, going back to WrestleParty, Sully had a one-off that he was doing at Pierce Field in East Providence, Heritage Days Festival. Someone who lived nearby had hit him up because he saw it being advertised in the East Providence Gazette, whatever their local rag is. He saw it being advertised, WrestleParty, and he hit him up and he said, "Hey, my name is Josh Silva.
I love this already.
Right? I'd love to help out.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of wrestling." Introduced himself, offered to help out. So Sully said, "Yeah, sure, we'll be there such and such a time." So we're putting the ring together. And sure enough, this kid introduces himself to me. I say kid, but he was already taller than me at 15. And he didn't act like a 15-year-old. He acted more mature than most people I know. Hey, my name's Josh. I talked to Sully earlier. He said I could help out. I'm I'm a wrestling fan.
Now, was his brother involved with this part or just him?
At the time, no.
Okay.
It was just Josh. So Josh is like, he introduced himself. So I'm like, all right, grab a board, kid. And he was helping me out. He was helpful. So I just kind of, started dropping knowledge on him. Because I asked him, I said, what is it in wrestling that you're interested in doing? What do you want to do? He said, "Oh, I want to promote." I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Okay." So I tried to talk to him from the perspective of a booker, a promoter, from outside the ring and what it is we do and why and those types of things. Soaked it up like a sponge. Ended up doing some work with What, for as short-lived as it was. And his brother at the time, Thomas, was going to try his hand at pro wrestling and started training with the Kingdom at the XWA for a little while. Well, they're also big fans, as you know, of combat sports.
Oh, they love it.
And that just felt more natural to them. So both of them decided, we love wrestling, but we're going to be in the fight game. So they had made the transition. And, I hadn't talked to Josh in a little while. Freaking pandemic happened. World almost ended. And he hits me up out of the blue. He's like, "Hey, I know it's been a while. How you been? This and that. August 20th, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm booked with the RWA, but I'll happily tell T Phoenix to go fuck himself." There was an event on the Battleship Cove. Not the one that just happened recently. This was August 2021, I believe. Either 21 or 22, I forget. It was the first time something like that had happened at Fall River's Battleship Cove in a long, long time. and the boxing community stepped out big. Josh gave me the opportunity to announce that event. And that was and has been my foot in the door with the boxing. That got me involved with CES Promotions, with whom I announce their classics. If they have a classic invitational where they basically field the best amateurs on the East Coast, I get a chance to announce those events for the CES, and I'm blessed. I'm over the moon to do so. They're usually in some really, really fancy arenas, so I got to look my best. I got to be on my better behavior. It keeps me on my toes. It keeps me sharp,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun.
So when we talk about whether it's boxing or wrestling, do you have a favorite venue over these years that you got to announce at or commentate at?
Hard to narrow it down to just one.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite big venue has been the Mohegan Sun Arena.
That's sick. Yeah.
It's, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there's so many pay-per-views that have happened there. I mean, it is truly historic. It is, I won't use the word iconic. I think it gets thrown around a lot. But there are some of history's greatest fights have taken place there. So some of wrestling's craziest moments have happened there. And it felt authentic. There is a genuine electricity in that air when that arena fills up. That has been my favorite big arena to do.
Mm-hmm.
The atmosphere of Resolution 18 was unlike any other atmosphere that the XWA ever created in the West Warwick High School Gymnasium.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And they've been there quite a few times. I've worked that place quite a few times. Nothing quite matches the energy of that night.
Yeah.
So when you say venue, there's venues, but there's some nights where that venue is just Rockefeller Center.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. How has Bobby Rossi's commentary style evolved from when you first walked in the door and started getting involved with RWA to where it is now?
Started as a color guy,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because I always had some kind of smart ass comment or remark to make.
Yeah.
So that's how I got started.
Yeah.
And really, I fell under the tutelage of a man who made his re-debut in RWA's Legacy this year. Rob Massey was my first play-by-play guy that I got to really pull from.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he had experience, I mean, he still does, but he had come into the RWA fresh with, at that time, 4+ years experience calling minor league baseball.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so he had the feel of what it was to be in a live environment. He came in, he got involved. We had chemistry just by working together off stage, off camera, backstage, and we had the idea of teaming up as commentary unit. The
Mm-hmm.
RWA at the time was overdubbing, and it was just not hitting it. You know,
Yeah.
like we Rob and I would watch and be like, "Bro, what do you think? Think you want to try this?" So we gave it a shot. We gave it a shot at one of the it was like the last taping at the Chop Shop before Dynasty. So we did it. It went off very well. To the point to we could not only sense a change in the atmosphere in the room, but we felt as though it enhanced the actual performances of those in the ring.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the boys even said it. They're like, "Nah, you know, we were kind of playing off you guys." So
Uh,
that's when Rob and I were like, "Yo, we got something here. Let's run with it."
mm-hmm.
And I learned from him my first year, because even though I had the willingness to talk and I had a bit of character and I had a lot of things that are kind of natural that you need going
Mm-hmm.
into it, I really didn't understand the format, the flow, when to be up, when to be down, when to sit back, when to be up front, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And that's how I got started. That's one person that I learned the most from, because I learned not only how to be myself, but I really did learn like the ropes from him.
Mm-hmm.
Palladino is somebody that I also played color off of too, because while Rob was definitely the first play-by-play guy I worked with, Palladino was never at the chop shop. And that's not to throw any shade at him. Palladino's done his share of Chop Shop shows.
Yeah.
Palladino's done his fair share of Empty Boys and Girls Club shows. You know what I mean? So at this stage of his career, he's not going to be at a place like that. He was at the XWA, and working with him, that was the first time that I ever had a chance to commentate television caliber talent. First time I ever had the chance to commentate at a live venue full of 300 plus people.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So I learned a lot from each, but it was Rob Massey with whom I cut my teeth.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when we look at everything Bobby Rossi has done, has there been like a show that either you announced or you commentated for that really does stick out to you?
They all do bleed together. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
But
or even a match or something that you got to be a part of in some aspect.
I'll give you one of my favorite calls.
Okay.
Go back to Resolution 18 one more time, because it was a soiree, I'll tell you. Firebrand Championship title match. First match of the night, right? Starting off high. An indie who's who was in that matchup.
Yeah. This match is iconic. I've talked about it with Dijak on my podcast.
Bro, you had, correct me if I'm wrong, you had Holiday, MJF, Ace Romero, Kellen. Obviously, Kellen was in there. Who else?
Oh, this one. I remember. Oh, I was thinking the year before. Swerve Strickland was in that one, I remember.
Swerve was in it.
I want to flip too, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. He was like the seventh guy or whatever.
Yeah.
And he was not expected to be there. That place popped huge. Yeah. His music hit. So going back to Thursdays, those of us that were on the B squad were the A squad players. And then when the TV guys came into town, a lot of us had to step aside or at least be willing to take on a slightly smaller role for the night. And that was something that a lot of us learned how to do with grace over time. You know what I mean? You step aside for the greater good. And in doing so, we eventually became the A squad for the big events.
Yeah.
And Kellen was a part of that too. But Kellen became a true locker room leader Thursday nights. He was one of those guys that was holding it down. Him and Trigger. No shade towards anybody.
Yeah.
There was a void in the locker room after JT left. And Kellen filled that void as best as he could. While Kellen was there and while JT was there, Kellen had a chance to work on himself a bit more. And he did. And throughout all of the second half of 17 going into the first half of 18, Kellen was an absolute dog. He put over anybody. He carried people. You know, he really did his due diligence and then some. So going into that matchup, you got to figure the way they ran things at XWA, I was never given details. They wanted me in the dark all the time to garner genuine reactions. So I'm looking at who's in the match on the card. I don't even consider Kellen a contender to win.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you see those names,
He's climbing up. He's making it. It's been like 20 minutes. Everybody's down. Oh, no, you got to be kidding. You have got to be kidding. Well, I legitimately popped up out of my seat.
Nice.
Because for that moment, I was a fan, but I didn't forget that I had a job to do at the moment. And when he pulled that title down and that place erupted, I had no choice but to have to match that energy.
Yeah.
And I did. And I had a chance to share my wrestling journey with the rest of the people that I've had with Kellen. I said, folks, this is a man that when I first met him, he was dejected. He was depleted. He wasn't even happy to be there, let alone have to wrestle. Now you're looking at the Firebrand champion. I don't remember everything I said in the moment. I don't want to butcher it. It was one of my favorite calls because it was real to me at that moment, damn it. And I made it feel real to everybody else. And I know that's true because Stryker put his arm in front of my face. He goes, Bobby, you have given me the goosebumps, my friend. This is and then he followed through.
Yeah.
We closed out the match, but he legit had goosebumps. So if I can make somebody like Matt Stryker, who's really seen and done it all, actually feel something in that moment, then it was affirming to me. It was like, oh, maybe then I can do something with this. Maybe I'm onto something. Maybe I'm not
Yeah.
just playing a role. And no, they're not always going to be home runs. They're not always going to be Keller wins a firebrand. But I try to make that bit of realism happen with my calling.
Mhm.
And that's when you ask me, how do I keep fresh? Well, I think about the rudiments, but I also think of how I can stretch those rudiments without breaking form, but still put some new spin on what it is that we do.
Yeah. So when you talk about Kellen Thomas winning the Firebrand Championship, you said it, as much as it's your job, it's still cool to try to be a fan in some aspect. Has
Right.
there been anybody that like to you, it was crazy you got to commentate or be a part of something with wrestling? And on the other end of that, has there been anybody that you still want to commentate something for?
I wouldn't mind trying my hand at commentating some sports combat.
Mm,
The thing of it is, though, I'm a little leery because, like I mentioned before, when it came to wrestling, I actually got in there and I did it.
mm,
And I don't necessarily need the pat on the back or the accolades, but I did need the experience. I felt as though that was a necessary thing. And for me to be a good commentator in sports combat, I'm gonna have to do it. I mean, I'm gonna compete. Well, I think I'm gonna have to hit a bag or two, man.
yeah.
Learn more about the sweet science before I start to call it. That is something I'd like to do. That is something I've been giving a lot of thought to.
Nice. Yeah, well, I'm super jealous, man. You got to call the one match I wish I did, calling a Sean Spears match.
I did. It was a who's who
Yeah.
for a good while coming through that building, man. And I had the chance to call matches that I would have never guessed. You know what I mean? Cobb
Keith
versus
Lee?
Keith Lee.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. Before they got even hotter than they are now, man, and they put it down. That
Mhm.
Resolution 17 match, they put it down. We keep talking about the stars and all this kinds of stuff, and it's awesome because while I had the chance to see all that take place, I also had the chance to watch my home promotion go from being a club, a dirty little secret, to a credible business,
Mhm.
and that it wouldn't have been possible without all of the effort of everyone involved. But if there's one person that I got to give a big, big special thank you from my heart to, it's Teddy Goods.
Mhm.
Teddy Goods has been great to our family. And he's always been a good guy. He's always been one of the good ones. We talk about that. He really has been. But giving my family the opportunities that he has, the chance to recredify ourselves as more of a legitimate company, as more of a legitimate promotion, hands down, without Teddy's help, I don't think that would have happened. So
Wow.
again and again, I'll never be able to thank that man enough. I want to thank you for being as good as you've been to my family as you've been. And I also want to wish you, Mr. Goods and Mrs. Goods, all the love, luck, happiness, and fulfillment that being a young family is going to give you.
Yeah, he tells me only if somebody mentions his name he'll watch the podcast. So I'll be sure to send him that one. I told him straight up I know he doesn't watch the product. Well,
That a boy. Good for
well,
him. He's seen enough of this crap.
well, Bobby, I like to end every interview I do the same. The day you decide it's all done, what do you want your legacy to be remembered for?
Oh, that's a good one. I want to be remembered for, if at the very least, I made it feel real for a second. It being the spectacle that we're all a part of, the show that we're all a part of, the show that we all watch. I hope there were those times where I got you to forget that it's a show. That's really all I want.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for this, and I want to thank you for everything. I think you're the reason I got into commentary because I think last minute you got sick or something, and they need somebody on the call at Live Pro Wrestling. So they threw me on like 5 minutes before the show, but it's been such a blast. It's always an easy night when I get to call action with you. So thank you for everything.
Oh man, thank you for keeping me on my toes. Thank you for inspiring me to be better. And thank you for being a bro.
Yeah.
100%.
I appreciate you, and I appreciate everything you did. So thank you, Bobby, for doing this. And thank you, everybody, for watching this episode of Best for Business.